Okay, welcome again to our next session of the Symposium 2020, A Year Without Public Space, Reflections and Outlooks. I'm very happy to announce this particular session on one hand because it's covering a field that we haven't explored in this very long webinar series, which is actually already going on since May. And the symposium is a concluding event, and so I think it's good to look at this topic now, and also because we were able to get, I believe, three very interesting speakers on this particular topic, which is basically to look at campus as public space in the age of pandemics. Many of us, maybe also in the audience, have some link to education and are working or worked on campuses. And of course, during the pandemic, fundamentally, the way how we are using campuses and how we are teaching has fundamentally changed. In many universities around the world, there was a switch to online teaching. Of course, online education is nothing new. Many people have experimented with this before, but the pandemic was really a catalyst that almost immediately switched to this as a predominant way of teaching, or maybe the only way of teaching. Now, beyond the provision of online courses, of course, another very important point, and that is one of the topics that we are interested in, particularly today, is being in a university, coming as a student on a campus is, of course, much more than just taking online courses. It is meeting new peers, talking the first time maybe with a scholar or professor after the class, and mingle with others. And all this is, of course, very much kind of compromised in the current situation. Same also for us teachers. We cannot necessarily see our peers and discuss projects and so on. So we were thinking that this could be, in the context of public space, also a very important question to discuss how this will move on, how it's at the moment the situation, but also how we see the future of universities under these conditions. Now, we're very happy that we could get three speakers that will talk about this topic from different places and backgrounds. We have Peter Ligné, Executive Director of the Worldwide University Network. He's connecting with us from New York, and Worldwide Universities Network is also a partner and also fund a big part of the symposium here. Then we have Jose Escamilla, Director of Tech Labs, who's linking to us from Mexico. He had to get up very, very early. And then we have Raymond Chan, University Dean of Students from the Chinese University of Hong Kong, which is also where I'm also working. So thanks for all of you to join this session. Before we start with the first presentation, just some housekeeping. If you want to raise any questions to our speakers or generally for the session, you can send us your question or comments anytime with the Q&A function. The chat function will not work, but Q&A. And we will come back to your questions in the roundtable discussion at the end of the event. So let me now welcome the first speaker of this session. I was thinking it is maybe a nice way to start with Raymond Chan, our Dean of Students. Raymond, before he joined or took on this position at CUHK, was an educator, a professor at different universities here in Hong Kong, and his own work is comparative studies of social welfare systems in different parts of Asia. So I think he also knows a lot about social life, which I think is a very important part of the discussion today. And of course, we invited him today because he, with a whole team of emergency team at the university, was looking at how to respond to this crisis. And we felt it's very interesting to hear from somebody who kind of on the front line has experienced many of those questions that later we can also discuss more in a wider context. No? So Raymond, the floor is yours. You can share your presentation.
Yes, okay, thank you, Hendrik. So let me share my screen. Is it okay?
Yeah, maybe function, what was this? F5.
F5, is it? Okay, F5.
Let's see if that works. Yeah, perfect.
Is it okay? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Hendrik, for your very nice introductions. So my primary role of Chinese University is the University Dean of Students. So my primary duty is to take care of the students who might be staying somewhere in the world or might be staying in the campus. So in the past few months, I have the opportunity to work with different colleagues to try to manage the, in a sense, try to manage the space of the university to protect our students from the threat of the pandemic. So maybe I can share with the audience, with the participants and the panel member of what CHK has experienced, but in terms of the changing nature of the public space in age of pandemic. So, well, a very rough review of the meaning of public space for me. Well, I'm not an urban sociologist, but I try to learn about the meaning of public space, in particular, how university is being interpreted as a public space. So for me, public space is a space which is open and accessible to all people, regardless of their background, even though they are not the members or the holding legitimate roles relating to the space. So this is with the mission to promote inclusions. So the public space will be a site for social mixing, exchanging the values of thoughts, and promote the nature of the social within the space. So it's about the quantity, how much being open for the public, we call it public. But we're also concerned about the quality. So quality and quantity. Quality refer to the nature of the social mixing, the quality of the exchange among different people, right, between the public and those who are holding legitimate positions within the space. So before, public space normally talk about the physical space, but now we also talk about virtual space. I'm sure other panel members will talk about how the let's say the online learning can promote the virtual community or the virtual space for social interactions. So university as a public space, is it real? Is university really a public space? So for me, it seems to me it's a contested concept. So for quantity, we're talking about how much or the share of the campus is being open for the public. The open space, the classroom, the office, the lab, the library, canteen, or hostels. But some of those are open for the public, but most of those are not. And then the second question is concerned about the quality. So who has the access, public as the outsider, private as the insider, and what they can do on the campus without much restrictions. So this is about the quality. So quantity and quality counts and help us to assess the nature and also the quality or the performance of the public space. So university as a public space, for some, it seems yes. Because by convention as well as in reality, university, I mean, in most of the, I guess in most of the countries, or at least those universities which I have visited, there has been opening for the public for various purposes. Let's say for leisure purposes, sightseeing, but some campuses are very, very beautiful, or even doing morning exercise. I remember in one of the universities in Hong Kong, in the morning, a group of residents living nearby, they would go to the podium of that university and doing morning exercise, playing Tai Chi or other kind of exercise. And for cultural purposes, for example, attending concert or visiting exhibitions hosted in the campus. For example, in CHK, we have 2 museums. Correct me if I'm wrong, Hendrik. One is about Chinese culture. Second one is about the culture or the climate change. So we want to attract people to visit the campus. So we hold a lot of exhibitions and also the intellectual public lecture and seminar. But I want to connect the university with the wider public. So that is the connections between the community and the institutions. Of course, in reality, though not all the spaces are open for the public. So there's a public space versus other. So CHK but give you some sense of CHK. And the participant, you can have an idea of what is CHK. So CHK has the largest campus among all the universities in Hong Kong. So, well, particularly, everyone knows that Hong Kong is a very small city. So CAU has, I think it's more than 100 acres. It's the largest campus in Hong Kong. So on that side, you will see that it's a beautiful campus. You can overlooking at the total harbor. So it attracts a lot of visitors. So this small beautiful lake in the autumn and in the winter. And if you go to another site called Harmony Pavilion, you can have a wonderful look of the total harbor. So a lot of people that will flock in the campus just for sightseeing. So CHK usually holds an open campus policy. A lot of visitors without any restrictions, well, they can visit the campus, enjoy the sightseeing. But sometimes, well, even though it's not authorized or approved by the university, well, some students will exercise their own discretions because there's no control, no access control in before, at least. So they will organize a large rally, inviting other students to join the rally in the campus. So this picture shows, might be in 2019. I didn't check the exact date, 2019 or even a little bit earlier, but likely it's in 2019. I think it's in September. So I think it's thousands of students or even the public, they flock in the campus to participate in the rally. I think it's about protesting against the government policy. So that makes the campus really, 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 really public. But university is really a public space? Not really. Well, if I check the land ground, because in Hong Kong, the nature of land ownership is quite different, except one or even two small pieces of land are owned by individuals. Most of the land, except those maybe in new territories and other part of Hong Kong, the land are basically owned by the government. So the government will assign the land ground, we're using the land ground, we assign the management right to the institutions. So it seems that the university owns the land, but in fact it's not. The university owns the land or manage the land through the land ground, which is assigned by the government. But the university will have the final responsibility for the management of the space. And this subject to the land ground, the space managed by the university will be subject to certain requirements. For example, the purposes. The land ground will specify the space is for education purposes, and you cannot, let's say, you cannot open let's say a supermarket for the public in the campus. And you cannot open up all the catering facilities for the public because the catering facilities in the campus is restricted for the staff and students, but not the public. So that make the nature of the university public space a little bit tricky. But of course, in reality, it seems that we didn't do any identity check. Everyone can go into the campus and use our catering facilities. So in general, there's no requirement for opening up the campus to the public. And in some cases, it even restricts the public access to certain services offered in campus. For example, the catering facility. There's a notice stick outside the entrance of a canteen. So by rule, university is not a public space. There's no such requirement. And sometimes, well, as I said, well, particularly before 2019, the campus is basically open to the public. But sometimes because of flooding in of the visitors. So this picture shows a visitor visiting another university, the University of Hong Kong, Hong Kong U. And this is a picture showing a large number of visitors. Most of them are kids. They visit the campus. And this stir up some kind of resentment within the campus stakeholders, for example, the students. So the students that organize a campaign, they're not asking the please leave our campus. They just ask them to behave yourself. Don't make any noise in the campus. So that means university, well, even though it's open to the public, but the insiders would still like to impose certain kind of control of the public visitors. And before the pandemic, there is another major social event happening in Hong Kong. That's the social incidents because of the extradition law amendment. I guess some of you already heard about it. And there were some confrontations happened inside the campus or nearby the campus. And that caused a lot of campus safety concern. And after the confrontations in last November, or before the mid-November, at least 6 public universities in Hong Kong. And after that, because the campus management, they have a great concern of campus safety. So they start to impose a certain kind of restrictions on the public access. For example, identity check. They will check every visitor. But even though they were not saying that you cannot visit the campus, but you have to, let's say, you have to show your identity card. And they will do some registrations for the public to enter into the university campus. Of course, if you are the staff of the student, you just have to show your ID card. If you are the alumni, you can also show your alumni card, and then you can access to at least to the Chinese University campus. And some universities will go a little bit further to put up some checkpoint fence or even equipment. For example, if you look at that pictures, you'll see some universities put up the turnstile machine. So everyone, if you want to access to the campus, unless you hold a card or you hold a designated QR code, you tap your card or QR code on the machines, and the machine will let you in. And that is outside the City University of Hong Kong. And this turnstile machine is even more complicated. It's located outside the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. It's because after the 2019, the social incidents, the campus management they really want to enforce the control. And after that, that restrict the public access to the campus a lot. But CHK campus is a little bit different. We didn't have that very tight control of the public access to the campus. And this, and another university, they built up some fence. Well, that happens, I think, in until they have that enforcement until probably April to May this year. And now they already closed that gate. They use another gate. So at that time, in the most critical moment after the social incidents, they hire some additional security guards that stood outside the main entrance. And so everyone inside, they have to show the card and do all the registrations. But this fence still left. This fence is still there in order to protect the campus. Okay, and then the pandemic arrived in Hong Kong from late January. I think the first case was confirmed. That case was imported from mainland China. That case was identified in January the 20th or 21st. I'm not so sure about, but that will be from here. So that table shows you the experience and the extent of pandemic threat to Hong Kong. So basically from here, you'll find there were two peaks. The first one is in here, March to April. Second one is in here, from late July until late August. So the academic terms, well, in CHK and most other universities in Hong Kong, the term one, sorry, this is the term two, sorry, I make a mistake. This is the term two. If you are in Japan, this is the term one, almost the term one. So the term two is in here. It's from January to May. And then the term two is from early September to December. So in here, because of the sudden attack of sudden arrival of the pandemic, university have to take very drastic change within a very short period of time. So everyone in here, we have a heightened sense of at risk. And also we have to make the change almost instantly or almost daily. And that have tremendous impact on the campus. And in here, well, in fact, the university or other university, they have planned to reopen the campus or try to adopt more face-to-face teaching, or we call it return to a new normal during the summer. But because of the second peak, most of universities, they have to change all the plans suddenly within 1 to 2 weeks and retain the kind of teaching mode that is a mixed mode, or most of the courses are teaching through online in late July. And now, well, I'll talk about the current situation later. But gradually, the situation subsides. And seems like in Hong Kong now, we are more or less okay. And now we are in here in November, early November. The university is planning to adopt more face-to-face teaching. But of course, we still have to keep the mixed mode teaching using the online technology in the term two. So the COVID-19 since early 2020, as I said, the first case was identified in Hong Kong in late January. So from then, the health became the primary concern of everyone. So before, in 2019, everyone is still debating, well, the campus safety as the primary concern. Well, now we are still defining campus safety is the primary concern. The safety changed from, well, the kind of security, the human safety, to our health. How can we protect the campus community? How can we stop the possible spread of the virus within the campus? So the health precautionary measures are probably in almost every part of the campus. But the primary objective is to minimizing the number of people in the campus and regulating their interaction. So reducing the number of people in the campus, students, staff, or the visitors, and regulating the interaction. That will have implications on the social side of the public space. So for example, for the faculty and staff, they have to work from home. Well, Hendrik and Stephanie, for some time you might have to work from home, even though I spend most of the time in my office. They have to work on shift. We divide the people, for example, in my office. Well, in the worst time, most of them have to, not most, yeah, 99%, they have to work from home. But in other time, depends on the pandemic level, we might divide them into 3 teams or 2 teams. They have to work, they have to come back to office to man the essential services. Well, we use a lot of the Zoom meeting, even though now we still use Zoom meeting within the campus. But for some meeting, we'll use a mixed mode. For the education, that is, well, dramatic and perhaps very traumatic for some of the staff and some of the students. We advise the students do not return to campus because it's not safe, for even traveling. And we adopt the online learning in almost all courses in term 2. And now I have roughly, there is 80% of the courses are still conducted through mixed mode, and approximately less than 20% were conducted using face-to-face because of the nature of the courses. For example, lab-based courses, placement, skills training, all these require face-to-face training. So with very rigorous screening policy, the university allows certain percentage of courses to have face-to-face teaching. And then for the research and then the library, we impose a lot of access control, social distancing measures, temperature, and we provide a lot of hand sanitizer. And at one time, we also provide surgical masks, but not now. Well, some of you might, Hendrik, I'm not so Hendrik, you realize that we have installed several machines, automated machine for selling the surgical mask in our campus. For the catering facilities, same as well. But for the catering facility, we also have to follow, we call it 599G, that is a health regulation imposed by the government. And at one time, we only allow 2 persons sitting together in one table in a restaurant. So that almost cuts 60% of the seating capacity of any catering facilities. And for the residential facilities that only apply to the student hostel, we also advise the resident do not return to the hostel. We also turn from this term, we turn all the shared occupancy to single occupancy, and that drastically reduced the capacity for approximately 60% of the number of the student bed space we can provide to our students. We also reserve another 10% of the hostel spaces for quarantine or decanting. That is, whenever there is a case, suspected case happened in any student hostel, we can allocate, let's say, 10 or 20 students to that decanting space or for quarantine purposes. We also assign a small number of rooms to help those returning students, but because of very special reasons, they could receive special approval. They can return, let's say, from USA or from Europe or from China or from Southeast Asia. They can stay in the room for quarantine. After they complete the mandatory home quarantine requirement, well, they can move back to their own hostels. And that's, as I said, the primary objective is to minimizing the number of the persons in the campus and regulating the interactions. And below, I can show you some pictures of what happening now in the campus. So now, a very quiet campus. So you can find this I took that picture in the midday. Usually that will be a very, very busy campus. But now in here, you can count the number of the students I can find in the pictures, probably less than 10. So it becomes a very, very quiet campus. It's located right outside the library, so almost a center place of Chinese University of Hong Kong. So another part of the mall, again, a very quiet campus, less than 10 students you can find in the pictures. So at the back is the university library. So if you want to visit the library, a very important study space and doing research. If you want to go visit the library, you have to go through that machine. It's a machine measuring the temperature, but also with facial recognition purpose. But because of protecting privacy, we didn't activate the facial recognition functions. We only use this to detect the temperature of those visitors. And the visitors, they have to go through that turnstile, and then they have to step in here to check the temperature before they were allowed to visit the library. And this picture was taken in the our university clinic. So we provide the hand sanitizer is in here. So everyone, once they step in the clinic, they have to have the temperature check first. The temperature machine is over there, and then they have to sanitize the hand, and then they have to step in here. We put all the marks on the floor. This is the measure for maintaining social distancing. So the first patient steps in here, the second one in here, the third in here. So there is approximately 1.2 meters from one to another visitors. So that is all following the health advice of the university. So in the past few months, what were the student concerns as far as what I learned from the students through limited interaction, face-to-face or online, because most students, they're not in campus. So my observation is, well, in the very beginning, they were very, very frustrated, particularly those who were asked that they have to leave the hostel or go back to the home country because of the pandemic. Now, they were very, very frustrated. They didn't have a lot of, in the beginning, they didn't have a lot of advice or support on using the online learning. University at that time is also not well prepared for turning before 100% or almost 100% using face-to-face teaching. Suddenly they have to change to 100% online learning. So everyone felt very frustrated, but they have to adapt. So students in the very beginning, they were very, but gradually, I think most of the staff and also the students, they gradually adapted to the situations. I think in term one, just after several months, I think this term seems to me is much better. I received lesser complaint from the students. So now, well, the primary concern of students I can classify into three issues. The first one is about the quality of the teaching and learning. Well, first is about the delivery of the online learning, because everything new is new to the student and also new to the faculty. The faculty suddenly they have to stood in front of the camera and then deliver the lectures. And I was told that it will be even more difficult to conduct the mixed mode teaching. You might have 5 students sitting in front of you in the classroom, but at the same time you have to look at the monitor to interact with those who appear in the screen. So that is very, very complicated. The second one is the IT infrastructure, particularly those who stay in mainland China. But because of the IT policy adopted in mainland China, we have to set up a special VPN for those who were still staying in mainland China. And so we still have a large number of students who are still staying in mainland China and also other places of the world. We also have to have some special arrangement of the classes, because our students, as our panel, some students might be in America, some students in Hong Kong or in Asia, but some students might be in Europe. So the scheduling of the class is another issue. We also have problems in arranging online examinations. Some staff complaining or some students complaining about the issue of cheating in online examination. Some students complain about the campus facility, for example, the opening of the library. Some material, particularly those rare books or those images published. For example, students from Faculty of Arts, they make a lot of campaign. They cannot access to a book published in 1950, which didn't have electronic copies. They have to go to the library. But in the worst time, the library was completely closed. They only allow a student to make a request. But sometimes the student find it very difficult or very reluctant to return to campus because of the pandemic. And now, but increasingly, as I said, we are adapting to it, and some students prefer to keep the online mode. For example, now we are using the mixed mode. But sometimes I ask few of my colleagues and say that most of the students, they will prefer to stay at home, particularly those part-time students. Now they prefer to stay at home. So likely in next term, we will maintain the online mode. Another issue is about the residential needs. Normally they will ask, can I stay in the hostel because some problem in my living environment, or can I return to hostel because of other reasons? Or some overseas students, international students, they will, can I return to campus because I miss the campus? I really want to enjoy my final year study in the campus. So we have encountered a lot of requests from different types of students. So the third one is about the social network. So the social side of the space, social network on campus. My observation is that is reduced to minimum. Why in Penn State? So that is in the beginning of the year. The graduate adapted to it, but most of the students that I have encountered, they would told me, well, unfortunately, they will still prefer to have the mixed mode. Some of them still prefer not to return to classroom. They enjoy that kind of flexibility, but they really miss the kind of social interaction with the peer groups. So they really want to return to campus, particularly stay in the hostel to mingle with their friends. So that reflects the needs of the social interaction. Well, some people also ask, has the pandemic increased the level of loneliness, isolation, and alienations? Well, we didn't have a full set of data confirming whether it's true or not, but I have checked with my counselor that issues affect those active cases of our counseling center. So that means for those who are already suffering from similar kind of problem, let's say the mood disorder, that kind of conditions might worsen their problems. So that could be an issue for certain groups of students, but might not be applied to all types of students. So I can say different student and different response. Sometimes it depends on the different perceptions of risk. Some people will find that the risk level is very high, but some students says, I don't care about it. But most of the people, they accept that there is risk. But the only difference, a major difference, is the level of the risk perception. No, I don't think any students that I've encountered, they will consider there's no such risk. So if the university impose certain kind of health precautionary measures, they will follow. Let's say we have a policy of imposing on every campus visitors or the stakeholders that you have to wear masks in all the public area. So my observation is 99.9% they will follow. But there are still some interesting case is, for example, because we want to keep the social distancing and minimize the social interaction within the hostel. So we propose to move some students to a single room, but some students say, no, I prefer to stay in my room with my flatmates because they trust each other. So I remember in one night, we spent almost 4 hours convincing a group of students, please move to a single room, it's safe for you. They say, no, we don't want to. So at the end, okay, then you can stay in a single room. But luckily, we didn't have any single outbreak case in this hostel, in this particular hostel. Some students insisted to hold face-to-face orientation activities in the late August. And we spent a lot of time, almost 3 months, convince them it is undesirable. At the end, because of the outbreak in Hong Kong from July, we successfully convinced them that it's not safe. So we changed all the orientation activities for the new students from offline to online. And another issue is about illegal hostel residents. We call it SNIC. We use the term SNIC in the Hong Kong university context. We did not allow any visitors to visit any hostel where you're not a legitimate residents of that hostel, but we still find some cases. And we find the 2 critical cases in the late August, and 1 case did involve an outbreak. But later we confirmed that case didn't visit the hostel for almost 10 days. So that case didn't affect that hostel. But at the end, we found that there are a lot of illegal residents in that hostel. And we had to arrange almost 50 students in a quarantine camp organized by the government or to some rooms that are provided by the university. And that happened in the late August. So my general observation is there seems as a trend is the increase of privateness of the campus. So on one side, you will see the restrictions of the visitors. So basically the outsiders are being discouraged, even though CHK didn't say that, no, you cannot, being an outsider, you cannot visit the campus. We didn't have that very strict policies, but basically we discourage the outsider to visit the campus. We stop almost all the exhibitions, so there's no other attractions. We don't host public events. No, we don't host the conference. So the outsiders, no, please don't come to the campus as far as possible. And on the other side, because a number of users reduce, I mean, both the outsiders and the insiders, Also with the space restrictions, social distancing, and the adoption of online teaching modes, we find that the publicness within the insiders, there's a downward trend. And that affect the quality of interactions among our current student groups or between the staff and our students. So that could be an issue. So give you some ideas. So this is I took that picture outside the hostel. So you see a lot of posters. Basically, the idea is, well, this hostel very, this is a very private space. If you're outsider, an authorized person, you're not allowed to enter. So no visitors, remind them again. If you want to go inside, you have to use a CU link card, which is an electronic card.
Raymond, I think your time is almost up. I think if you...
Yep, I can see it. So this is the library, and this is the canteen. So you see we have a lot of facilities separating the space. So there's study space. So what I really want to argue is the changing nature of the public space, the decrease of the nature of the publicness of the space. And also that also affect the nature of the social interaction among the campus stakeholders. So thank you very much. I finished my presentation. Thank you, Andrew.
Sorry, Raymond, I didn't want
doesn't matter, doesn't matter.
Just thanks very much, Raymond. So I hope that was interesting for the others, because I felt, for me, even though I work on the campus, but I'm actually most of the time at the moment at home, that actually those kind of nuts and bolts, how really a big institution like a university has to go through all those kind of different practical issues that then affect, of course, all those other layers that we are hoping in terms of more educational philosophies and so on to work, right? So I hope this, I found it interesting to, even though I am at the same university, but I didn't kind of study it in this kind of level of detail. Now we come from this perspective to the next presentation. For this, I want to introduce Professor Peter Lenier, Executive Director of the Worldwide Universities Network. His own academic background is Professor Lenny is a neuroscientist and JLA's distinguished university professor at the University of Rochester. When you go to his bio on our website, there's a long list of academic achievements, and also he was leading various academic institutions. But the reason why we were very happy that he was joining, and also for the support of WUN is because of his role in the Worldwide Universities Network, which is a global higher education research network with 23 member universities on 6 continents. And we felt that this is also now another layer in the discussion that is very interesting, I believe, for discussing the role of the university in the future, and also, of course, university collaborations and so on. So without further ado, Peter, you have the word. Yeah.
Thank you, Hendrik. I'm delighted to be able to be with you today, and I'd like to congratulate you and your colleagues on taking on this really important topic. I also want to say how pleased I am that WUN had the opportunity and the good taste to invest in the outstanding team of researchers that put this meeting together. At the end of 2018, the team from CUHK and Auckland received an award from WUN's Research Development Fund for a project to analyze the role of urban forms in making sustainable cities. The team got off to a very vigorous start, hosting a number of events and student exchanges, and producing academic and policy publications. But what's been really remarkable is your agility in adapting your research activities in response to the pandemic, including hosting 20 webinars and, of course, culminating in this international symposium. At the end of my remarks, I'll say a few words about why and how support of the kind that WUN provided to your team can be particularly effective in promoting international collaborations, and why networks, now more than ever in the circumstances of the pandemic, are likely to be important. But what I'd like to do to start with is review a bit about what's happening on campuses generally. And there I want to start by poking around on how university campuses differ from other enterprises. What are the key attributes? I want to review a few of the key attributes that distinguish university campuses from other places of work, and what might, as a result, be some distinctive vulnerabilities they have to COVID-19. Now, of course, many of the things that happen on campus are the same as happen in any other major enterprise. But the fundamental business of the institutions is unusual in a number of respects. Universities are places of intellectual discovery and places of intellectual challenge and debate. And they make huge investments to create environments that are conducive to these ends. And the investments particularly recognize that the value of much that happens stems from there being very few constraints on how people work, on where they work, and on when they work. So putting rules in place, as has had to happen in response to COVID, can be immensely disruptive. Now, you can get a feel for what's most distinctive about campus life and its vulnerabilities by looking at how students and academic staff spend their time. And I'd like to begin with students, particularly undergraduate students, because I suspect that it's among students that COVID has had by far the largest impact. So let's start with what's perhaps been the object of most public concern about COVID-related disruptions. What happens in the classroom? The management of classrooms is clearly a significant problem. And that's been a major challenge for universities, which have followed very varied trajectories that fall between business as usual in some instances, that is, where they haven't really changed their practices at all, to being all virtual, where their practices have changed radically and there are no students on campus. I'll have a bit more to say about some of the implications of this. But for now, the key point I want to make, and I really want to emphasize this, is that what happens in the classroom is only a very small part of what's important about the experience of being an undergraduate. This is one of the least appreciated facts about universities. And it's certainly not well known among people who have not been university students themselves. But those of you who remember your student days will probably agree that the classroom, while important, didn't really in any fundamental way define your undergraduate experience. The defining part of the experience is very different. And perhaps the best characterization of the canonical undergraduate experience is in a marvelous UNESCO report prepared in 1996 by a committee headed by Jacques Delors, who was very prominent in the establishment of the European Union. This UNESCO report identified 4 pillars of learning, and I think they capture magically what's really important about what universities should be doing. So here are the 4 pillars: learning to know, learning to do, learning to live together, and learning to be. Now, only one of these, learning to know, is much tied to what goes on in the classroom. The other 3, particularly learning to live together and learning to be, are the life-changing parts of learning that depend on immersion in rich social environments. Now, I go as far as to assert that the defining characteristic of a rich undergraduate education is rubbing shoulders with bright peers. Nowadays, they're often also from very varied places, and being provoked and challenged by your peers, and learning from them an immense range of things about the world that often wouldn't be learned otherwise. And what's striking is that universities don't sell this central part of the undergraduate experience, and that makes it very hard for them to talk publicly about its loss. The details, of course, vary from country to country and the kind of university and the age of the student. In countries with a residential tradition, where the typical students are 18 to 22 years old, stay on or close to campus, and where their lives tend to be campus-centric, the restrictions resulting from COVID, things like social distancing, restrictions on access to residences, limitations on the sizes of gatherings, and in some cases curfews. These are an enormous blow that deeply undermines the quality and value of the experience. The loss might be slightly less in places that don't have a residential tradition, but it will be serious, and it really is devastating. Now, in the US, with which I'm most familiar, universities are substantially residential. Nearly all of them are residential. And they've handled the COVID challenge in varied ways, from moving entirely online with no students in residence, to largely residential with a mix of in-person and online classes. The second group is particularly interesting in relation to my point about the quality of the undergraduate experience. My colleagues in such universities, and my own is one of them, are projecting substantial loss of students next term, when large numbers of students who've had an unsatisfying autumn semester, especially freshmen, simply take the rest of the year off. Now, that's quite easy to do in the US, probably less so elsewhere, but it highlights the really devastating impact on some of the centrally important parts of an undergraduate experience that COVID has manifested on us. Now, if a student can't have a satisfying experience on campus, can the university still offer an effective one, though necessarily more limited, through online classes taken remotely? Others know more about this than I, about what's technically possible, and I'm sure Jose will discuss it. But I'd like to offer a couple of general observations that stem from things I've said up to this point. First, it seems to me likely that the enormous investments universities have made this year in moving classes online will result in some permanent changes to the delivery of education. That is, regardless of whether campus life returns to normal, online delivery of lectures and related material in flexible format and available to students on demand will surely become an established part of the pedagogical portfolio. This could have far-reaching benefits. Second, lectures in large classes are the straightforward part of moving the instruction online. The trickier part is filling in the rest of the portfolio. How do you construct effective online labs? How do you run effective small group discussions? How do you build teams? These are still unresolved problems that I think will be very hard to deal with. Now, I'd like to end my remarks on students by saying a little bit about international students, those who've come from outside the country to study in the host university. They've been particularly hard hit. In many instances, they've been trapped in their host countries, unable to return home. Or if they've been able to go home, they've been unable to return to campus because of travel restrictions. New students have been unable to take up residence as freshmen. And even if online classes are offered by the university, in many cases, the students are vulnerable to poor internet access and time differences that further eat into the quality of the experience. But perhaps the biggest loss for international students is one that's not so much talked about. It's the cultural one. For many international students, the reason for going abroad is not just the university education. It's for the experience of and immersion in a particular culture. They want to be in a particular country. It's, I think, generally not sufficiently recognized that students choose the country first and the university second. And this has some really interesting implications if mobility remains limited and online education maintains a significant foothold as an alternative means to a degree. Let me give you what I think is one of the most interesting emerging issues here. If more students opt in the long run for online rather than physically moving to another country, the competitive landscape for universities changes. That is, if students can't get to the country they'd prefer to study in, they'd look much more closely at the programs individual universities offer and will compare across countries in ways they haven't tended to do so far. So this greatly increases the competitive pressure in universities and actually could be a particular challenge for universities in Anglophone countries or universities that offer their programs in English. At the moment, there are very many places, and there's going to be, I think, a huge increase in competition amongst universities in Anglophone countries or those that offer education in English. Let me now turn briefly to research. Many of you will know firsthand, and better than I, how disruptive COVID has been to research. The degree of disruption, of course, varies greatly with discipline, and with some, particularly those involving time-sensitive observation or measurement, they're really vulnerable. But of course, COVID has also provided lots of really interesting research opportunities for a range of disciplines, including yours. I mean, I think yours must have been a major beneficiary in seeing interesting, large research problems emerge. So I'd like to offer a couple of general observations on the broader effects of COVID on the campus research enterprise, because I think they've not really been sufficiently absorbed. The first is about the loss of informal commerce. Informal discussions with colleagues, whether about a vague idea that needs to be shaped into a coherent proposition or a challenge to some concrete assertion, it greatly sharpens thinking about research problems. No well-developed research project can be pursued in isolation and without the informal back and forth and debate of discussion. So the loss of opportunity for it, particularly through the absence of casual encounters, has done real damage. The second observation I want to make about research is about access to talent. The lifeblood of a major university is the intellectual talent represented in its academic staff and faculty and its students. Major universities compete hard for the most outstanding individuals, and most of the universities are well connected internationally because these connections enlarge their access to talent. It's not for nothing that the world's most successful research universities have on their faculties large numbers of researchers from other countries. So it's therefore perfectly natural that your best research collaborators will often be found somewhere else in the world. Now, finding the right collaborating partners depends on collegial networks, and these are established through varied mechanisms, including notably disciplinary workshops like this one and conferences, where the informal encounters and discussions that take place on this side are hugely important. And in many instances, particularly when you're developing your career, they can be the most important part of attending a meeting. And these encounters have been virtually extinguished by COVID. So the damage, I think, is severe. And the loss of networking opportunities has had a disproportionately adverse effect on early career researchers, those in the period that spans the completion of the PhD to the first academic job. I should say, by the way, that recognizing this problem is one of the things that a network like WN can do something effective to address. Let me now finish by saying a few words about how an international university network, one like WUN, fits into the picture. How does a university get value from an international network that's, as Hendrik said, spans 6 continents and 23 countries? The key lies in the fact that despite all their similarities as major research institutions, the universities in the network sit in very different geographical, cultural, and legal contexts that not only shape how they support research and deliver education, but also provide them with distinctive perspectives on many important research problems. The network can add major value because by capitalizing on the varied geographies and cultures of its members, it enables them to assemble and support diverse sets of collaborators to tackle major research problems in fields where comparative analysis really matters. I would say that the team that's led this symposium perfectly exemplifies that value that can be extracted from a network. But even beyond the research problems, the diversity of the network is a huge strength to be exploited by its member universities as they deal with COVID-related challenges they haven't faced before. They're all experiencing similar problems. For example, student mental health issues, problems of how to manage compliance with COVID regulation, or many, many others. You can enumerate a long list. And they've had to address these in different legal and cultural contexts so that solutions that work in one place will not work particularly well in others. This gives rise to a huge variety of ways of dealing with the problems some of which will work well, some of which won't. So there's an enormous amount of valuable information to be shared. And a key role for the network, one like WUN, is to facilitate this. And I think with that, I'll stop and thank you. And of course, I'll be happy to deal with some questions later as they arise.
Thanks so much, Peter, for this great presentation and the nice words on our project, but more importantly, really giving this kind of wider perspective and very good points of where we are in our crisis and also what maybe we might want to address, and maybe later we can come back to some of those points. No? Let me now come to our third speaker, and which I actually got to know through also the WUN network, which is Jose Escamilla. As I was saying, he's the director of Tech Labs. He works at Monterrey University in Mexico and has developed, I believe, for many years already online teaching approaches, and then was, like we all, basically confronted with the issue of the pandemic, and maybe particularly because of his background and knowledge of online teaching. I find it's particularly interesting to have you here in the session, and of course also you bring another context in, as Peter was saying, and I believe also in this that we, particularly with the pandemic, we share all like a similar problem, maybe, or virus that is going around, right? But then all of us have slightly different ways of needing to deal with it, and so on. Right? Yeah. So Jose.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and good night and good afternoon and good morning from Mexico. I think what I will share is the experience of Tec de Monterrey, and if I have time, I would share some predictions about the future of after the pandemics, particularly in teaching learning in universities. But maybe we can let that for the panel discussion. First, I have to tell you that Tec de Monterrey is a Mexican university that is geographically dispersed in Mexico. We are in 26 cities, and we have 90,000 students, so it's a large university, including high school, because in Mexico, universities have high schools inside. So around 30,000 of those are high school students, and the rest are undergraduate and graduate students. So it will help also to understand part of the situation I'll be explaining. Also, in our history, we have been very active in educational innovation. One of the things that we have done in the past is being very active in distance learning. So we not only offer this complete distance learning programs at the graduate level. We have done that for more than 30 years. We also offer for our full-time face-to-face undergrad students and some high school students also. We offer online courses. In a normal year, not in a pandemic year, 26,000 students take 1 or 2 courses online as part of their academics. No? So when we were shocked by this pandemic, we used part of the learning that we have done in online to provide an opportunity to our students. So I will share now my screen with my presentation. I think that you're looking at my screen right now. So the first thing that I want to touch is what we did with teaching learning. We created a model that we call HiFlex Plus. The high part is for hybrid, because we decided that the model could be online or blended, and that we will not make mandatory for students nor faculty, nor even collaborators of the university to come to the campus. It was a decision that they will make if they wanted to come to the campus or not. And it depended on their preference and also on the vulnerability of them or the people they live in their houses. So we found out that around 70% of faculty prefer to work from home, mostly because of health issues and family issues, because they have to take care of children. And 70% of students choose to work on the campus, or to have a blended experience. So it was very difficult to pair the preference of students and faculty. Nevertheless, this is the moment to say that since March, when we stopped having face-to-face courses on campus, none of the educational activities have been permitted by the Mexican government. So in no single state, there has been allowed for universities or any educational institution to have face-to-face activities. So we have been doing online learning since March, since the middle of March up to today, even though we prepare for that. The model is flexible because if we have a blended model, we could we could go to online if needed because of the pandemic, but we're able to do that. And the plus part that will be most of my presentation is other resources for personal development and well-being. That's the way that we define it. And I think that part of this is trying to recreate the other components of the university that Raymond and Peter were talking about, you know, that the components that are not only the teaching part of the university. As part of the academic support or the teaching learning part of the university, as we could not open the university for all the students, we offer virtual and remote labs massively to our students. Some labs were open for researchers, particularly labs related to attending the COVID situation. No? Anything that was, we were allowed by the government to do that. We use our online and digital library and offer online support of librarians. We continue to train our teachers to develop the skills to teach at a distance. And we also did something interesting. We did a diagnostic of all our faculty, and then in the heads of department work with the faculty of the department to decide what kind of skills, both pedagogical and technological, faculty has to have. And we offer them courses to train them, but also peers to mentor them on that. So if, for instance, if we find out that Henrik, as a faculty member of Tec de Monterrey, knows to use certain tool or certain pedagogical approach, and I don't, I can be mentored by Henrik. No? We also created a students' website to solve all online service and resources questions that they have. And we decided also that this was a time to share what we were doing with everyone. So you will see that in several places, we are sharing some of our resources with the world. No? So in this case, teaching and learning practice using our website, both in English and Spanish. One of the things that we created to recreate the other parts of the campus is what we call Life at Home. Life, it's a Spanish acronym that stands for Leadership and Student Formation or Student Education. And it's part of Student Affairs in Tec de Monterrey. It's part of the Dean of Students, as Raymond is in the City University of Hong Kong. And one of the things that we do is to try to replicate those activities at a distance. So, for instance, we offer more than 1,200 daily live online activities and classes on culture, fitness, art, well-being, gastronomy, etc. And those classes are offered for our community. When I use community here, I mean not only students, but also faculty, collaborators of the university, and the family of students. Because one of the things that we find out is that being locked down in their houses, the situations of the students and the family relationships will be having some frictions, no? And we know that, for instance, domestic violence increases in times of the pandemic. So we think that we should open some of our activities to the families of our students. Also, we offer also sport activities at home and esports for the students. We continue to offer help to our student union or students in our student unions to continue their work, but we also have some student thematic and regional association around very different things. Like for instance, people that meet, that come from different places, different countries, or that have different tastes or likes or sexual orientations, for instance. So we foster that those students continue to meet at a distance and continue to work and help other students in the same situations. Additionally, we offer more than 50 courses on health, music, art, leadership, psychology, and well-being, not only to our students, but to our community at large, including people working in Tec de Monterrey and the families of our students. Another thing that we offer is called in Spanish, Cuida tu mente. Translated to English will be something like take care of your mind. This is related to the, I would say, emotional and health well-being of our students. And we also provided this to our community at large, including family and Tec de Monterrey employees. We offer free psychological, medical, and nutritional counseling for our community 24 hours and 7 days a week via the internet or a telephone line. We have personalized follow-up of the students by mentors, advisors, and career directors online. We usually do that face-to-face, but we offer that service online. We created and shared support materials to maintain good emotional and psychological state for the work, and also good practices for working at home, and continue to participate in your community. What are the good practices to maintain your participation in your community? Another thing that we have been very successful at is offering courses from our partnerships that we have with Coursera and edX. The partnership, the offering of free courses from edX has finished on the summer, and the one with Coursera has continued up to February next year. So we offer more than 4,000 courses and specialization programs from Coursera and edX, and we encourage students to complement their learning, develop what I like to call power skills. Other people call that soft skills, but I think they're so important that we should call them power skills, and obtain certificates that are valuable for their professional career. We have had more than 97 course registration on Coursera for these, I would say, non-for-credit courses, and more than 7,000 students have finished a course. And we have seen a huge increase numbers of registration during the low work periods, like for instance, the start of the summer holidays, or after exams, etc. We see how we have a peak of a surge of registration of students in these courses. We also decided to help the families of our students and our collaborators, offering potential preferential prices, benefits, and packages and discounts from Tec de Monterrey suppliers. So we extended those discounts to the families, and we also created a network where families and all our tech community can offer their service or product if they have businesses, so that we can support each other to create more of a network in Tec de Monterrey. And the last part related to this recreation of what happened on the campus, and I think is one of another part of creating those contact serendipity of people that are not part of your classroom situation, is what we call communities of students. So in our new educational model, we have 9 points of entry, or disciplinary points of entry to the university. You choose as a student one of them, and after a year and a half, you decide what kind of major you can do inside that point of entry. So we created communities that have special names I think it's in Esperanto. The students decided to do that, and 9 different names, each one for one of those communities. And those communities are cross campus, no? Around our 26 campus. But in order for that to work, we have mentors. Mentors are paid by Tec de Monterrey, so like faculty or people trained to be mentors in Tec de Monterrey, and they can have up to 350,000 students divided in groups led by peer mentors. Those peer mentors are students from more advanced semesters that mentor the students from lower semesters. And they are in charge from around to 10 to 20 students. So in those large and small communities that one mentor can have and several peer mentors can have 20 or 10 or 20 students, we have been recreating these opportunities to network students from different ages, courses, etc. Some examples of the online activities that the mentors and peer mentors are doing are guided meditation, a virtual conference with experts, and also several recreative activities. I give two examples here. They have party nights where they meet, they grab something to eat and drink, and they can talk about whatever they want. They can be thematic or they can be open-ended. And they have movie nights where they decide that they want to watch a film on Netflix or whatever. They all watch the film at the same time. And then at the end of the film, they meet on Zoom and they discuss about the film. They have this, they try to recreate this kind of situations. I think I have still, my time has ended. So maybe I stop here and I can talk later during the panel about what I think will be the future, maybe some positive and other not so positive effects on the future for teaching and learning in universities. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Jose. I must say I find it very fascinating to see those initiatives that your university and probably also produced by your team to, I believe, has developed, which is really quite far-reaching. Just for the attendees, you can, of course, send us your questions anytime, and we will put them forward to our speakers so they can also read them. Now, I saw that also internally there was a question. I think that from Raymond also this kind of thought how to organize these kind of social activities between students and that online, right? Which I find is of course one of the reasons for this entire session, indeed a very essential one. Now I find that and we heard from Peter Lenny, the third and fourth pillar. No, these are exactly those pillars, right? To live together and to be live to be, right? Now I think that Jose, I found you had a big number of great initiatives there. Maybe do you want to share? You were already saying that like some work maybe a bit better and some less. What do you think? Which were the maybe let's think positively, right? What were the most kind of promising or most successful of those events in view of creating this kind of casual encounters, a possibility to socialize? I think I saw there a number of those that somehow seem to relate to this, right? Particularly on the last slide that you had, or you can also go back to that if you want. And then maybe kind of reflect about like why maybe one worked better than the other, no? Because many of them they sound actually good, but now having already operated them, maybe you have already experienced, right?
Thank you for the question, Hendrik. I think that they are. I try to see if I have a circle of, but I think I don't have the slide here. I don't have it here. So the life, which is this all the activities that the students can do, that we believe there are central to what happened to the students in the campus, as Peter said. Peter talked about the pillars of Jacques Delors, which is I think is a great, it's a classic, it's still a valid work. And part of our educational model, our educational model has also 4 pillars. No? So, and one of them is, we call it a memorable university experience. And why we call it like that? Because when we decided to do our new educational model, we find out that when we interview our alumni and talk about them in focus group, etc., many of the things that that they remember that were very important for them didn't happen inside a classroom. It happened outside of the classroom, and were related to some of those activities or group of friends they met in cultural, sport, recreational, student union or communities. You know? So that's why we created life as a set of activities that also includes mental health and emotional well-being of our students, you know, physical well-being, etc. The other part that is in our 4 pillars of Tec de Monterrey is inspiring faculty. So inspiring faculty is also something that we found that students remember. Maybe they don't remember all their faculty they have during your courses. Maybe all people that are seeing this webinar cannot remember all faculty, but there are some faculty that really touch you. You know, faculty that touch you because they teach you really what it means to be an engineer or a lawyer or a doctor or whatever that you're studying in the university. But many of these faculty also touch you personally somehow. No, these people that really approach to you and were meant to be close. So as part of our educational model, we want our faculty to be close to our students, both in, I will say, vocationally in what it means to be in the profession or whatever that you will work in related to your major, your discipline, but also in a personal level where we can have more contact with that. And the experience that we have had in the past with distance learning is that when we compare face-to-face and distance learning, we have found out that there are not many difference in learning, no significant differences. I think many people have done educational technology studies will know that those kind of students, those kind of studies give you no significant difference. But one of the interesting things is that the development that we did for our online courses, there is a very careful design in which we design courses. I'm not talking about the response to the pandemic. I'm talking about our regular online courses, because I also believe it's not the same. No, it's one thing is responding in emergency to the pandemic, and one thing is online learning. In online learning, we decided that we want to be very interactive courses, students and faculty. And those courses are designed centrally by 3 faculty members from different campus. And there's a group of experts that work with them to create the course materials and the activities. And then we give that course to several people in Tec de Monterrey, let's say 20 or 30 faculty, so that they adapt that to their experience and deliver that in small groups of 25, 30 students. So when we compare those courses to the face-to-face experience, one amazing thing that was significantly different is that students that were online find out that they felt closer to their faculty member, to the professor, than students face-to-face. That means that the physical distance in the classroom starts after the second row, no? So, or the emotional distance somehow. So you can, it depends a lot on the kind of activities that you do with your students that make this rapport or this relationship. So I think that that's one of the things that we can also try to do, not only with those extra activities that I showed there, but also in everyday class situations, we as faculty, the way faculties are the heroes of the pandemic, because faculty have done a lot to continue the academic continuity in all the educational institutions. There's a lot that we can do to relate to the students, to be close to them, and also to make them network. I think I took a lot of time for my response, Andrik.
Thanks very much. Great listening to you. Now we have here questions coming in. I think Sujata from here at CHK has a good question. How can universities extend their role to the positive development of the city or community? Your thoughts, please. And then I don't know if that can be a related question or a second one. Going forward, what will be the future campus look like if only 50% of the area is required? It would be more online and less campus teaching, right? Anyone wants to answer to those two aspects in one question? Or yeah, Raymond, you
maybe I can offer my personal observations. Well, I would say for those non-online institutions, after the pandemic under control, I guess it will be around next summer. The situation will be gradually return to the old days. But of course, we already understand or estimate that the pandemic might still be there, and some restrictions will still apply on the campus. If the situation gradually return to normal, so I will not see the online mode will maintain at the scale that we are having now. So most of the campus facility activities will be returned to normal. But of course, because of some traffic restrictions or some people's preference, there might be increase of the online activities. So if only 50% of the area is required, that seems to me might not be happen. Those conventional universities will return back as a conventional university. Well, I would say most of the consumers, that means the students or even the parents, they will still prefer to send their kids to overseas campus, as what Peter mentioned. Well, it's not just getting a degree, but getting a complete, holistic university education experience. So that kind of expectations, still prevailed among the customers. So once the situation under control and return to normal, most of the students, they will go back to the campus. And more or less the campus will return back to the old days, but of course, with some new restrictions applied. Yeah, thank you.
Is there anyone else that want to reply to the same question? Otherwise, I saw there's also another question.
I just want to say that I agree with Raymond that there will be more online and more blended, and I think that's one of the benefits. I would say unintended benefits of the pandemic, that we are learning what are the things that we can do online fairly well, and what are the things that face-to-face adds a lot of value. So we are understanding what are those differences, and I think that we will be able to give that flexibility to our students and faculty. And in terms of universities to extend their role in their community, I can share that we have something that is called Distrito Tech. In Spanish, it's like District Tech de Monterrey. And it's we started around our main campus here in Monterrey. Now we are doing that also in Mexico City, in one of our biggest campus in Mexico City. And it's a project that is being done with the government of the city, so that we are committed to rebuild around the campus several, I don't know how to word in English, hectares, I think, of around the campus to rebuild the social tissue around that, because during a certain time there was a very vibrant community, but then we have very old people or very young people that is like the word mix that you can have around the campus. So some of the facilities, etc., were starting to deteriorate. So we are rebuilding around the tissue of the campus, not only to have a more vibrant group of people, but also to attract more entrepreneurs, innovators, researchers, companies around the campus. So we are working that in Monterrey and in Mexico City.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much.
Can I just add a postscript here, Henrik?
Sure. Yeah.
So I think on the question of how closely life returns to normal, or a year, whatever from now, I think one of the interesting longer-term questions is whether working from home will become an accepted practice for academic faculty and many other administrative positions in universities. There are certain disciplines for which working at home is, to some degree, always been the case. But the wholesale shift, I think, may well encourage changed work habits that are permanent. And it'll be interesting to see how that affects the life of campus.
I thought what was interesting, what Raymond was saying in his presentation at the end, that from the student desire, you had something that on one hand, students seem to, they like the online teaching actually, but they don't want to miss the campus experience, right? So maybe that gives us also a hint of what the role of the campus, I mean, those key roles of learning to live together and so on, that those, I think probably it would be good to further focus on those ones also in the future, right? I mean, there was one question here. Actually, there are a number of questions coming in. Maybe in a way, maybe they might be a little bit kind of related. I think somebody maybe already answered. One question was those experience that people do now, and also basically maybe the lack of this kind of public space experience on the campus, or socializing and so on and so on, and also maybe diving into other cultures. If we add on the question, I don't know if that was intended by this person, but also maybe to bring this also a bit closer to Peter's work also. So for example, also this really immersing into other cultures and so on. If now students come out of the university and then go into society, will this have any kind of negative other impact, or will we see anything of that? Or maybe we can also rephrase it, seeing Peter's work, of course, and the question of exchange and work in other places. How could we otherwise provide those experiences, let's say, if the pandemic is still continuing, right? What can we do, right? In terms of, for example, exchange and immersing in other places, no?
Perhaps a word about international students. In many universities, of course, it's understood that they seek international students largely as the source of revenue. What's lost in that discussion is that international students greatly enrich the campus culturally. They have a tremendous impact on the domestic students in enlarging their access to the world and equipping them as global citizens. I don't see a quick return of international students to many universities, particularly those that have had very large numbers of them in the Anglophone countries notably. And their absence will actually do a great deal to undermine the richness of the undergraduate experience in major universities.
Just as a footnote, we were experimenting in summer, because we offer always as a credit course an overseas travel in urban design, which of course is very important to immerse in different cultures and cities, and often combined with a workshop, but also seeing, of course, other places. And we try to investigate basically with partners in New York and in Auckland to set this up basically as an online experience, right? To see, like, for example, remote ethnography, having linking to people on site, maybe like, for example, social workers that work really directly with residents that otherwise, even if you would walk around, maybe you would not necessarily always meet and so on. No? I don't want to say that this was not particularly.
But it's a very interesting point you raise, and one that actually WN as a network has been engaged in, is the question of the extent to which virtual study abroad, summer courses, or even extended semester or year-long stays, whether virtual engagement can stand in for the physical movement. In some instances, there will be opportunities, but it's actually quite hard. Not just because, for example, if you're doing a summer school, the time zone differences being a problem. The biggest difficulty is assembling teams of undergraduate small groups that really are the essential components of a rich experience of that kind. An important trick that people like Pepe at Tech will need to inform us about is how to make it possible for small groups of undergraduates to work collaboratively when they're in very disparate places. Exactly. And in different time zones.
We have been very worried about that issue because we believe strongly that an international experience expands all the possibilities of our students. So we encourage a lot our students to go abroad, and 65% of our graduates, or when they graduate, they have had at least a summer session in another country, in another university, in another country. And right now, we don't have students traveling a lot, as you may know. So we have been investing in doing some virtual courses, international virtual courses with other universities to try to replicate part of this. I believe that that's not exactly the same experience because it's not like as immersive as when you go there. And even if you have an ethnographic experience at a distance, you don't even have the odors and the tastes, I don't know, of different cultures that really change you. And in particular for countries like Mexico, where many of the students still live at home when they go to the university. They don't, it's not like in the United States that they go to another city and they live in the university. Many of our students still live at home. Going to another country is also the first time they experience leaving home. So it's another part of the experience. So I believe that in the future, after the pandemics, for those students that doesn't have the opportunity to travel abroad, virtual internationalization can be a good thing because at least they will give them some possibilities. But we are not yet able to replicate the same experience.
In fact, I didn't want to say like we are able to replicate this. I just thought like experimenting with this still can be maybe interesting, not to not only basically to then say, okay, we shouldn't travel anymore, because as soon as we can travel or study abroad, right, we all probably agree that this is a much better experience. But I think that also some of those experience might also go back to basically our classroom teaching, because now with something like Zoom and so on, we can basically offer like some of those international experience, like the fact that we have this roundtable discussion between different time zones and we can have it in a regular class in a way, right? But I totally agree. In fact, as a student, I went 2 times abroad for both reasons, to immerse and on the other hand to go to a good school, and I totally agree with this.
Maybe a good effect also of the pandemic, a positive effect is a reduction of traveling. I think that we will understand that it's not necessary to travel for everything. Particularly in research, there's a lot of travel for faculty. I read an article that said that all faculty travel in the world amounted for the CO2 footprint, half of the CO2 footprint of the UK. So it's a lot. That's a lot. No, so we are able to reduce significantly. I don't know. I don't think that it's zero, but we can reduce significantly our travel in the future. It can have a good effect on the planet.
But there are other aspects as well that might be also in terms of inclusivity, because obviously there are, for example, many of the exchanges and so on that we have are more or less to whatever the kind of middle class environment and so on, and sometimes to work with countries with much less resources, there are often also big problems to get visa and so on, right? And where a lot of hurdles are put financially and
Yes.
in terms of visa and so on, where it becomes much more fast and easier to reach out to places where this then it's not required, right? But of course, meeting in person always is better. Now, looking at, I see that there are still some questions, but I believe we actually already are slightly over the time, and I think I always try to keep those webinars not too long, because I think this being on Zoom is always quite tiring and so on. So maybe I would say, even though I would love to continue to discuss more with all of you, and I can learn a lot, but maybe we come slowly to the closure. And I want to thank very much Peter from New York, and also for the support of WUN and your contribution today. Jose, it was a great pleasure to talk with you, and a lot of ideas in my mind, particularly you reaching out to also to families. I think I really love these ideas that you have your programs, not only looking at specific students, but also those issues that are related then to domestic violence and family situations, and to me that sounds like make a lot of sense, and a lot of amazing activities that you provide for your students. So maybe we can all learn from that. And then also Raymond, thanks a lot for your contribution, which I think is also very good to understand really this kind of I know that your work, I mean, you're a professor and you work also on other things, but today you provided a slightly more practical view on this. But I think it needs also this, because those questions of emergency questions and so on, these are in the end also sometimes the things that get into the way of other things as well, right? So thanks very much for this contribution, and anyway, we will see you on the campus hopefully. Now, at the end of the session, I also thanks for those that have sent us their questions and joined the session. We will later post the video of all our webinars on our not WeChat, on our YouTube channel, where and also on our Symposium website, as we have from the whole series of the earlier 20 webinars. So you can follow there. And just for the end of the session, I want to give back to my young colleague Stephanie to close and make a quick announcement of what we can expect from tomorrow. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Hendrik. So thank you once again for all the panelists for your presentations, our last session for today. I just want to give a heads up of what we're also expecting for tomorrow. So we actually, today is our day one of the symposium, and we have really fruitful day of 5 sessions. And actually we still have, I just want to quickly share my screen so that you can see the website of the symposium. Later I'll also post the link in the chat. Then you will see that we actually still have 4 sessions, 4 panel discussions tomorrow. This is Hong Kong time zone, so it's GMT +8. So on the role of research and design, on creating healthy neighborhoods. So we'll bring on not only the architecture and urban design perspective, but also the public health perspective. And then we'll also talk about health disparities in informal communities and high density communities. And last but not least, to wrap up the entire symposium and actually the entire series. We'll have a wrap up, a roundtable discussions and a closing remark to sort of reflect over the year and have an outlook for next year. And a very interesting bit, normally in a conference, we'll have a conference tour and we'll bring you guys out to look at some of the public spaces and some of the concepts in Hong Kong. But now that we are in a virtual environment, we actually also attempt to set up this virtual Hong Kong public space tour towards the end of the symposium tomorrow. So you can still register for it, where a small company Walk in Hong Kong will lead us through some pretty interesting and exotic community and neighborhood here in Hong Kong, and we'll look at some typical public spaces, typologies and environments in this neighborhood. So so you can see this sign up button, so you can just pick any sessions that you're interested in and sign up for the individual sessions, and you'll receive the Zoom registration link immediately. So yeah, so that's all from my side, and I'll just quickly paste the link to the chat box. So then we'll hopefully see you in 12 hours. Yeah, so that's all from my side.
Okay, so thanks very much. And maybe I just leave time for people to copy the link, but we are closing the session, and bye-bye for our guests from far away, and
Thank you very much.
good breakfast now, and a good start in the day. And we might go for dinner. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye-bye. Nice seeing you.